Hello, everybody. David Shuster here. Jim Jordan of Ohio was one of the leading House Republicans defending Donald Trump's attack on Venezuela. But Jordan has now been fact-checked to his face after pushing a false claim about Venezuela's role in drug trade.
I know folks in the 4th District of Ohio and what fentanyl and other drugs have done to some families that I get the privilege of representing. Helping deal with that, I think, is a good thing. And Americans recognize this for decisive action that makes a difference for us and, frankly, for Venezuelans.
Right. Fentanyl doesn't come from Venezuela. And there's definitely
Posing up to China and Iran, which are part of that, certainly does.
But most fentanyl coming to the United States also doesn't come from China and Iran.
Again, cozying up to China and Iran, talking about what matters on the world stage, is different from what most people who voted for Donald Trump heard him say.
And what Donald Trump said during the campaign and earlier is that he would focus on America first and avoid engaging in regime change.
We must abandon the failed policy of nation building and regime change. Regime change takes chaos.
You've seen how that works over the last 20 years. That hasn't been too good.
We're getting out of the nation building business. We're going to stay until such time as the proper transition can take place.
So how is regime change in Venezuela consistent with Trump's promises of America first?
How is that America first?
I mean, look, I trust the president to make decisions that are in the best interest of Americans, of our country. This president gets results.
But in this case, the results, the removal of Maduro, and the purpose have not been shared with key members of Congress. Traditionally, the so-called Gang of Eight, the chair and top minority member on 2 Senate and 2 House committees that oversee intelligence and military operations, those congressional committee leaders are briefed by the administration when missions are underway or soon after an operation has been completed. Not in this case.
Have you been briefed by anybody in the administration?
Still haven't gotten a phone call. Well after the operation yesterday, a staffer at the Office of the Secretary of Defense called the staff on the Intelligence Committee. But no, look, this is a long pattern and a particularly egregious example of a pattern of this administration not giving a hoot about the United States Congress.
I think when you have a guy who's not recognized as a head of state, who's head of a narco-terrorist criminal operation, who's cozying up to Iran and China, and he's doing it right here in our hemisphere, bringing that individual to justice, I think that's a good thing.
He gave the game away, right? He said over and over again, I trust the president. I trust it. Now, he's being asked to explain an imperial adventure, right? I mean, you did a pretty good job. An imperial adventure from the guy who was going to be America first and not get into stupid wars. And his answer is, I trust the president. I trust the president. I trust the president. That is giving the game away because 2/3 of my Republican colleagues in the Congress wake up every single morning and say, what can I do today to prove my loyalty to the president of the United States? And Jim Jordan, the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, seems to be unaware that our whole system, Dana, is set up to provide checks and balances.
And those checks and balances include the opportunity to question the rationale for a military operation. If the United States is now in a war or occupation of Venezuela or anyplace else, the Constitution says the war power is up to Congress and requires a congressional authorization vote. On the issue of regime change and stopping drugs, Donald Trump's Secretary of State Marco Rubio also tried to make that connection on a Sunday show, and Rubio got pummeled by ABC's George Stephanopoulos.
In the case of Maduro, look, it's very simple. This guy was indicted. No one ever did anything about it. He didn't think he was under threat or that the indictment was ever going to be enforced. It was enforced yesterday.
Hernandez was convicted by a jury.
Hernandez is the former president of Honduras who was convicted and sentenced for trafficking over 400 tons of cocaine into the United States. Recently, Donald Trump pardoned Hernandez.
I understand. You're asking me, the pardon authority is something that, I'm not involved in my role. I'm not criticizing it. I can't just comment on it because I just wasn't involved in those deliberations.
Do you support it?
I wasn't involved in those deliberations. I haven't looked at the case file. I haven't looked at the arguments made by, I've got a bunch of other things going on that are within my purview as Secretary of State and National Security Advisor, but pardons aren't one of them. So I can't comment on a case that, frankly, I'm aware of, but not deeply and familiar with, and I don't want to comment on something that I haven't had a chance to be involved in reviewing the file and the rationale behind it.
The rationale, or at least one of them, for removing Maduro from Venezuela is to help stop America's drug problem. But keep in mind that the drug problem in the United States is not just about the supply coming in, but also about the demand that already exists here. And the Trump administration, over the past year in office, has cut billions of dollars out of programs focused on drug prevention and recovery. For people who are addicted or might become addicted, the Trump administration has eliminated countless programs that were successful in stopping U.S. drug demand. One would think that if an administration was really concerned about a drug problem, it would try to eliminate the demand and the supply. But the Trump administration only seems to care about the supply from Central America. And even that argument falls apart when you consider that far more drugs are coming to the United States from other countries in Central and South America. Now, to be fair, the administration has given several reasons for the removal of Maduro, including geopolitics, stopping the influence of China and Iran, and putting a more pro-U.S. regime in place in Venezuela. But just hours after Donald Trump said the new president of Venezuela, former Vice President Delcy Rodriguez, is willing to do what is necessary to make Venezuela great again, Rodriguez gave a speech defying and hammering Donald Trump.
But in her televised statement, she was pretty defiant, saying that Maduro is still president and that the Venezuelan people will no longer be slaves or the colony of an empire. That's a quote. What exactly did she say to you, and what comes next?
Well, we're not going to judge moving forward based simply on what's said in press conferences. We want to see action here at the end of the day. Rhetoric is one thing. You see rhetoric for a lot of different reasons. There's a lot of different reasons why people go on TV and say certain things in these countries, especially 15 hours or 12 hours after the person who used to be in charge of the regime is now in handcuffs.
And that's fine. It may be that the new president of Venezuela, former Vice President Delcy Rodriguez, has given private assurances that she's not willing to state publicly just yet. And right now, soon after the Maduro abduction, Rodriguez may need to channel the outrage and shock of many Venezuelans. Still, all of this underscores that many things that get said on TV, including by the Trump administration and by Trump supporters in Congress, are motivated purely by politics and not necessarily by reality. And the reality, as Ohio Republican Jim Jordan has been reminded of, is that Venezuela is not producing much fentanyl. Venezuela is not a leading transporter of cocaine to the United States. Venezuela has not sent armed gang members into America. And the Venezuelan Maduro associates may not be eager now to work with the Trump administration. These issues are complex and often take time. Sadly, nuance and thoughtfulness are often not in the playbook for Trump supporters like Jim Jordan. For them, everything is simple and basic and driven by saying whatever might please their dear leader, Donald Trump. Thankfully, there are still media figures and lawmakers who are willing to call out Jim Jordan on the facts, even if it means humiliating Jordan to his face. By the way, Donald Trump has now tanked the Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts as artists and audiences flee. It was supposed to be a triumph.
A very big hello and welcome.
The president served as master of ceremonies at the Kennedy Center Honors. But headline, Kennedy Center Honors ratings tank like never before thanks to Trump.
A dance company is now the latest group of performers to pull out of a show at the Trump Kennedy Center after the president put his name on the front of the building.
You've got more artists now pulling out of scheduled events.
Check out that video at the link below. It generated a lot of comments on YouTube. One of the most popular from Richard, who wrote, "No artist wants to perform at a crime scene." Indeed. I look forward to reading your comments about House Republican Jim Jordan getting busted and fact-checked to his face on live TV. I'm David Shuster. Thanks for joining us.